Thank you so much. Oh my God, you guys are amazing. So thanks to Ben, Anissa, Jennifer, Deirdre, Robert, and Sean. Thank you so much. Oh my God, my heart is full. I think Boyana and guys.
Welcome. Thank you so much to all of the dancers and to Brendan. I'm Devyani Saltzman, the Director of Public Programming. Very happy you're all here with us for tonight. We're about to have a conversation between Brendan and Boyana, but before we begin, I want to acknowledge where we operate as the AGO, even in the digital space. We are in the territory of the Anishinaabe, the Wendat, and the Haudenosaunee, and the territory around Takaranto is governed by a treaty between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Anishinaabe Three Fires Confederacy to peaceably care for the lands around the Great Lake. I'd like to also thank TD, our sponsors of Talks and Performance, for their support of tonight's performance, and also to all of you on tonight in light of the US elections for being with us. Please remember to put your questions in the chat. And now, without further ado, Brendan Fernandes. Brendan was born in Nairobi, Kenya in 1979. He is an internationally recognized Canadian artist working at the intersection of visual arts and dance. Currently based out of Chicago, Brendan's projects address issues of race, queer culture, migration, protest, and other forms of collective movement, always seeking to create new spaces and new forms of agency, and always rooted in collaboration and fostering solidarity. He's represented by Monique Maloche Gallery, which has a booth at the Virtual Art Toronto, which is on now for the next 2 days. Please welcome Brendan and our Assistant Curator of Live Projects and Performance, Boyana Stanchik.
I am. I was just saying, Devyani, thank you so much. And obviously, Brendan and all of the performers, thank you so much for that incredibly exciting and innovative kind of new project. Truly. I think like I really miss being able to clap and sort of like show my appreciation for everything. But Brendan, did you want to sort of maybe reintroduce to everybody again and do a proper curtain call?
Definitely. And I just wanted to also acknowledge the land that I am on right now. I'm in Chicago, the traditional homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations. These lands are also home to the Miami, the Ho-Chunk, the Menominee, the Sacs, and the Fox. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, but I also wanted just to say, so grateful to my dancers who did the most amazing job. So I wanted to just call them out. Normally we would be finding a way to gather afterwards, but we will do that at a later time. But to the Hit and Run dance production team, Anissa Tapar, Jennifer Nichols, Deirdre McDermott, Benjamin Landsberg, Robert Haley, and Sean Brack. So the dancers. But I also want to acknowledge the other collaborations with Carson Solers, who composed the score tonight for us, and Jerome Harris, who worked with me to make the digital filters. And also, of course, to the team at the AGO, Devyani Saltzman, Brendan Stanchik, Aidan Solway, and Danny Winchester. So I just want to say thank you. So grateful. Collaboration is so important, and we had so many moving parts to make this happen.
You took away all my thank yous at the end. What am I going to do? I will thank them again. Absolutely. Danny has been so crucial to this. But so as Devyani had mentioned, we'll have a conversation for about sort of 15, 20 minutes. We will have some time for a Q&A. So it's actually, I believe in the Q&A function on the chat function, which is disabled. So you can still communicate to us if you want to. And I super encourage you to. It's a new project. It's a new commission. It's responding to the moment. I have a few questions, obviously, but I'm sure you will too. So Brendan, I kind of wanted to start from the beginning of ours talking about working together. And it was last year, and we started talking about your piece, Free Fall, and we sort of put it in the schedule. Free Fall, for those who may not know, is your work that was exploring and sort of offering tribute to those who were lost in the Orlando Pulse nightclub massacre in 2008. But then, of course, COVID came, and there was an option of showing part of that project remotely, because at that point, we didn't really know how long this is going to last, which is a path that we did sort of eventually take, trying to ask the questions that are embedded in your work about community and solidarity, but in a new way, and with formats and opportunities for congregation we currently have available, which is digital. So I wonder if you can speak about that process, or rather everyone's least favorite word at the moment, pivot for you as a way also to tell us more about what we had just witnessed?
Yeah, so, we initially started to think about, showing Free Fall, which was a film based on, a live performance I had created for the Getty in 2017. And we were also going to do a live performance. And my work, is based on this notion of bringing bodies together, to gather, to dance. And so we had decided we were going to create this kind of like larger format choreographed dance piece based around the film, and then create this kind of like open kind of like dance party at the museum. And then of course with COVID that got stunted, still in stunt, but I think we're finding new forms. And I think part of my work is also to restructure, to reconsider, and to really think through the moments of challenge and how do we find ways to create, and to also still think politically, and still to think about ways of engaging. And I've been thinking a lot before the pandemic, how do I use technologies to choreograph with, so I've been doing stuff with Snapchat, I've been doing stuff with AirDrop. And so this new technology, Zoom, which I didn't even know until the pandemic, has become part of my everyday. And I was really curious about the ways that we gathered, because we can't be with each other, but Zoom allows us to be with each other. So questions of safe spaces, the notions of freedoms and sanctuaries that come from me, like, when I went to the dance clubs in New York, like, that was part of a space that would create community for me. It was a space that I felt safe in. And, the Pulse Orlando massacre, that was really challenged for me. That was a moment where that space was not safe anymore. Mm-hmm. And so right now we're considering with like, with the virus, with the, social uprisings, right now in the United States with the, an election that still hasn't, been resolved, what is safe for us? And so I really wanted to think about this virtual space as a space that allows us to gather, but also as a space that kind of is safe in its virtualness. Like we're all at home. Like I'm thinking about the dancers, and like, we're all like, all of this was done remotely. Like we none of us have seen each other in person. We've all done this through this platform. So I was really curious about the kind of notions of safe space through this platform.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, that kind of leads me into the next question, which is, I can maybe imagine what it was like to sort of devise the choreography remotely, but how did you sort of communicate that or translate to the dancers to perform? Because you only had 2 or 3 rehearsals before this.
Yeah, and I think, this is, they're professionals. They are such, this is the way that they work, but there were different challenges in here. So, I worked with Karsten first to create a score, to create a feeling of sensation. So it kind of starts off kind of like dark and heavy. And, I'm also partially, I made this during the pandemic when I was, things were grim, things were challenging. Now I've come to a point as we've kind of moved on where I feel a little bit more like open, free, like for what in a certain way. So we kind of went with that thematic, and I did think a lot about Free Fall as its footnote. That piece was about the nightclub at Pulse Orlando. So those sort of sentiments come through, and then I'm thinking about the actual choreography, working with Anissa and Jennifer from Hit and Run, and kind of creating like tasks, motifs, sections, and breaking it down. And then we came up with a final kind of score that we then translated and rehearsed. And normally something like this, we probably would have needed less time, but just because we were trying to learn the technology as well, like how do I change a filter? How do we unmute ourselves? There was all these things that were coming out. So this technology seems super, like it brings us together, but it's also analog. So there was moments of that. And I really wanted to play with, this is what it does for us. So we can't change it. So let's work with it, which also is a very, for me, an important way to think about decolonizing spaces. We take it and it's had its history, it's had its structure, but how do we restructure? And so we were using that. And so the glitch, when they were coming in and out of the frame, like that to me was beautiful, but I love that moment of interruption. So there's this moment of interruption, but also these questions of what is visible, who's visible, the body is like fragmented at times. The body's trying to touch each other at times. So there's these moments of like playing with intimacy, which we've lost now in our time. But I think it happened here. Like for me, at least, like watching, I started to get like goosebumps and like shivers, and like I was like, can I come on now and say like, like it was it was beautiful. But yeah, we had 3 rehearsals.
Yeah. I mean, holy moly, that's sort of incredible. And I'm always really curious. I mean, we were sort of part of the rehearsal process, like a little bit in the background, and artists always have these really funny, sort of like cute names for different movements. And I was like hearing so many things that was really enjoyable, kind of like replicating a rehearsal studio. But also just to say, truly, I mean, I know everybody was seated, I know everybody was working within their environments, but those kinds of opportunities of like the rendering, the kind of like closing of the image, of changing the filters, and how that became part of the choreography was really seamless. And yeah, analog, but also matrixy. It was great. Success. So you did speak about this. I mean, this is such a sort of major part of your work, about sort of questions of collectivity and visibility, and they drive your artistic exploration. So I was just wondering, like, you kind of spoke about it, but maybe I can tease it out a little bit more. How did you negotiate in this space? I mean, the digital space is a little bit more flattened, but it's also not unpoliticized either. So I'm just wondering how those two kind of tactics work for obscuring or making visible or sort of like fragmenting.
Well, one of the ways I think that technology is working for me in this sort of like analog way with Snapchat or AirDrop is the way of finding collectivity, gathering bodies, in a way that we're creating critical mass through it. So, even like tonight, I can see that there's a number of people here, which makes me excited, but they're not necessarily from the same city. Remember when we were posting about that, we had to like specify Eastern Standard Time.
Yeah, that was new.
Other places and other countries, and we're asking like what time zone should this be in. So I find that use of technology is really important to kind of create a sense of critical mass, but also the ways of disseminating. I think that can disseminate further. And so my work as an artist and my responsibility as an artist is to create, questions of agency, questions to bring up our civil rights, questions to make my body visible, to make my body be heard. But in this platform, I feel like I'm able to, and I'm taking on this challenge to make it in a greater space. And so that to me, that's a really important point to using the technology. And this moment, this time has forced me to use it even more. I've been toying with it, but now I'm like, I have to do it, because during the pandemic, when it first started, I really sat down and questioned myself, and I was like, do I have an art practice anymore? My work is about bringing bodies together. And I was like, how do I do this in a new way? So I think resistance and resilience is really important to take on challenges in hard times. And I'm so proud of this piece, watching the dancers do it. It was so it just came, it fruition in a way that I imagined, but also thought it wouldn't, but it was. And for me, it created like a sense of agency for them, for me, for the audience, to kind of reconsider where we're at right now.
Absolutely. I mean, so much of our work that are kind of coming from a performance sort of reality and profession are under sort of like small question mark. But to be honest, I think that is probably one of the things that people will be more thirsty about when sort of restrictions do really ease, because I think what we are missing is literally those kinds of moments of congregation or proximity or applause, or like, turning off your phones before a show. Yeah. The Russell. I have one more question, and then we have a few questions from the audience that we can sort of tap into. But I wanted to ask more about sort of like the dance kind of like practice and the dance kind of vocabulary, because I mean, Brendan, we have known each other for a while, and I remember sort of early early performances that I saw of yours at like Diaz Contemporary, and you were really working with a ballet vocabulary that you still do, and you were trained as a ballet dancer as well. But then also I'm sort of reading a lot of kind of what could be sort of tagged as a Vogue kind of like element and ethic. And those are two very different sort of modes of performance with very specific kind of like histories and cultural narratives. And I'm just wondering if you can speak a little bit how they overlap for you as an artist and as a performer.
Yeah, definitely. And so my early background as a dancer was ballet and then modern dance. And a lot of it was, started in Toronto. So Toronto is like the way, the beginnings of me as a dancer. But during injury, I kind of stopped, post-injury, I kind of took a break. I felt mentally, physically, emotionally like broken by it. And so I kind of stopped. But I really, what brought me back to dance, ballet, modern, And the club, which brought back Vogue, was when I moved to New York when I was studying at the Whitney Independent Study Program. And again, what felt really important to me was the sense of community, the sense, for me, voguing brings on a very specific community of queer bodies, queer POC bodies that are trying to find a space of solidarity, and we've found it within the club. So that place for me was really important. And as a young ballet dancer, my community was my ballet school, and so I think there's something about that. And I always get asked, Brendan, how do you find your dancers? And I'm like, we're just friends. We've either danced together. I've now worked with Anissa and Jennifer a number of times, and so I know their collective. We know each other, and this is why I'm also like this. I wish like that I could have gone out with them afterwards, and we all went and gathered and celebrated. Which I'll probably call them or send them a note, but it feels weird because they just gave me their labor. They gave me it mentally and physically, and now it's like, we definitely did something amazing, but I want to give back now, the sense of gratitude. So those kinds of principles of gratitude, generosity, kindness, through collaboration come through dance, through Vogue, but also through ballet.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I never really thought about them the same way, but I definitely know practicing performers who really are living in a family. And I mean, from seeing the rehearsals, like it feels like the Hit and Run group really was one as well. Yeah. Amazing. Well, I had another question, but it's already been posed by the audience, so I'm just going to read it. Obviously, I love this, was noted. The person said, I danced with the performers throughout, which is super amazing. And I was moving a little bit too. The question is, could you talk about the title of the piece and the predominant colors?
Yeah. So the title of the piece, The Left Space, I think right now we're in a moment where we have to move forward. So thinking about political futures, political newness. And so the left space meaning what is left behind. So what have we like left and what are we going to move forward towards? But it also is within the political space, the leftist space. I believe that we are living in a moment that needs to have change. We're in a right capitalist agenda, and I believe that we need a left space, a more socialized space. And so that's where that comes from, the title. The colors from the textile, or the filters come from a textile that is a Maasai warrior textile that is a colonial textile. It's a plaid, and that plaid is now used by Maasai warriors to wear off predators at night. So they wear it because it allows, it hurts the eyes of animals. So that kind of noise, again, visibility, noise, but through visual hypervisibility, that fabric is really intense. I was thinking about those filters through those color patterns, but also through razzle camouflage that was used in World War I. So the filters act in that way to kind of create this visual noise, but it's also the colors that kind of represent police sirens. So a lot of my earlier work, the Pulse work, the work I did for Nuit Blanche deals with police abolition and ideas again of, how do we think about these structures, these structures that seemingly support our society, but also need to be rethought and restructured. And so that's where the colors come from.
Wow. And I think you were also making patches. I saw maybe on your Instagram. It's sort of like a material project as well as sort of immaterial and digital.
Definitely. And I'm also starting to make the actual filters. I've been working with myself and a sewer to make blankets, because now in a lot of my performance work, I use like props or sculptures. And so now I'm using textiles as ways to kind of like allow the dancers to move with each other. This is for a project that will be hopefully next summer in Brazil, where the dancers will hold these visual banners, their protest banners, their shields, their cloaks, but they can also hold them 6 feet apart and then move together.
Amazing. How many dancers?
This piece is in Brazil. I think we're 8.
Okay. Because I was looking at the question, which kind of maybe goes back to like super technical thing, but maybe it's just going to be helpful to kind of like note. The question is, how did you arrive at the number of 6 dancers? Because when they were watching on their mobile phone, they could only see 4 at a time. I'm just putting it out there. Maybe it's not so much to answer right now, like, but just to kind of consider all the different mediations of images.
I think I didn't want it. I was thinking again about the grid and what would look like aesthetically pleasing. And so foam would be different than a screen, but we thought like when we assumed, or again, I shouldn't have assumed that, it would allow for a nice visual. But then also thinking that, if you have 8, then it also becomes, you're seeing a lot, like with the filter, with the bodies, I wanted to kind of think of something that would also ease on the eyes and not over complicate the visual as a moving image.
The score was really a deeply moving and sort of engaging piece, I think. And also towards the end, when it was kind of like being rapturous, I think it was kind of an invitation for everybody also to join, in which case I almost stopped sort of like seeing the individual bodies and squares. I felt the breadth of that experience and the potential of like people kind of joining virtually or invisibly. I just want to acknowledge that Jen Goodwin, who is also an incredible curator, had posed a question, but I think we might have answered it. She was curious about the score, which of course is a set of instructions. And I asked you the same thing, but you did sort of know that what they were responding to is more so the music itself rather than a set of preconceived kind of directions, right?
Yes. So there was a moment of like this sound cue will, this is where you start to do the head rolls. And then, when we do that, or this, when we hear the breath, this is the time that, Ben does his solo. And so there was those kinds of things, but I gave them definitely like, ideas of like, how do you look at the camera? When are you looking at the camera? Like, so there were like moments of like, it wasn't just pure improvisation. There was definitely things. And then as they learned it in their body, we went in and there like was notes, like, I think that's when you heard the funny titles. I'm like, when, Union Jack comes on, I need you to stand up more. I want you out of the frame. So I think there was something where, just in the Zoom culture, you're very much like this way. So I was like, you don't have to always be in the frame. You can also be out of the frame. What happens when you move back? What happens when you move front? You're just exploring, So in the beginning, it was like super playful. Like I think it began with Anissa and Jennifer and I just playing around. And that camera movement of the fingers just kind of created this glitch. And so we really were like experimenting, but then we kind of created a vernacular. And that's kind of the way I normally work. It's like, and if it was a live thing, we'd be in the studio, I'd give them tasks, motifs, and then I'd be like, hey, let's try to do this thing again. But we just did it this way.
I would like to pose one more question myself, because we're also broaching on 8 o'clock and potentially sort of like election news. I don't know, but I did want to say one thing, because everything we talked about, me knowing what you're trying to achieve, me also knowing your work and your instincts and question. There was recently a New York Times article that was sort of interviewing a lot of amazing artists and thinkers and curators about protest art. And sort of like there was somebody had commented about the difference between protest art and activist art, one being sort of like for your community and one being for outside of your community, sort of like as a moment of instigator of change or instigator of questions. Where or do you think about that with your work, or what side would your work or maybe this experience fall on?
Well, my work is about trying to not find spaces of violence. I think that as community, we need to start to not say that this is my protest or this is your protest. That creates fracture, and that's partly why we're even like in this moment right now in the United States, there's this division, but it's also happening in Canada. So I think what I try to do in my work is thinking about again, the left space as this imagined space where we don't have to kind of say that this is our politics. These are our shared experiences. So for me, and it is utopian, but that's really what I'm pushing for. It's that we're supporting each other through our struggles, our traumas, to find something where we can all find solidarity in. So the left space.
Amazing. There's nothing else to add. Thank you so much for that. And my goodness, on that note, I also want to say again, thank you so much to Brendan, to Hit and Run, to all of the artists and performers. Thank you again to Devyani Salzman, and of course, Danny Winchester, our amazing producer. But also thank you for joining us. We are so grateful for your support and trust, and always look forward to seeing you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
One last thing. Thank you to the AGO and Toronto for hosting this.
Our pleasure. Thank you, Brendan.